Hello everyone. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to code our own new block type. Now, when I say block, what does that mean? What's the context here? Well, in versions 5.0 and later of WordPress, whenever you create or edit a page or post, so posts, add new, this editing experience for the content uses a block paradigm. So as we type, each new paragraph is considered an independent block, right? And you can click to reorder them or drag and drop to reorder them. Now, these are just simple paragraphs, but there are other types of blocks. Out of the box, by default, WordPress comes with paragraphs, heading, lists, columns, buttons, images. You get the idea. But aside from these default block types that WordPress comes with, we can create our own new custom block types as developers. So right now, let me give you a sneak peek of what we are going to be building together in this lesson. We see this block type named myCoolBorderBox with a smiley face. And if I click that, we see this yourCoolBorderBox. There's an input where I can type strawberry, and then there's a color picker. So maybe I will choose a color that matches strawberry. Okay, and then I can go ahead and publish this post. And then if I view it on my front end, we can see here are the default paragraph blocks, but here is that custom border box block. We see the word that I typed in, and we also see that color that I chose. And just to show you the reusable nature of blocks, I could add another myCoolBorderBox. So if I added it again, maybe this time I will say, I like oranges. And then for the color, obviously, I would choose orange. And maybe I want this orange box to sit down below the other paragraph, so I can just click move down to send it down. Go ahead and click update. And if I refresh the front end, there you have it. Now, I realize this is very ugly, right? This is not the pinnacle of graphic design, but that's not the point of this lesson. Our goal with this lesson is just to get you familiar with the very basics of coding your own new block type. Once you've got a grasp of the basic concepts, it's up to you to take the idea and run with it and create something that's actually good looking and actually useful. So, without further ado, let's get started. Behind the scenes, I just removed all of the code that was powering that custom block type. So now we can start together and move forward. In order to create and register a new custom block type, let's begin by creating a new plugin. Now, earlier in this course, we already learned how to create a plugin, so that's nothing new. So for the next few steps, I'm going to move pretty quickly. But let's begin by navigating to the directory where you've installed WordPress, and we are looking for the folder named WP Content. Inside that, we're looking for the folder named Plugins. And inside this plugins folder, let's just create a brand new empty folder. We can name it whatever we want, but I'm going to call it myCoolBorderBox. Okay, then let's open up this new folder in our favorite text editing program. Okay, in this new folder, let's use the text editor to create a new file. The name doesn't matter as long as it ends in .php. So I chose plugin.php. And I'm actually just going to paste in a bit of boilerplate code. You can find this code in the description or linked resources for this video lesson. Because we've already created a plugin earlier in the course, I'm not going to type this out letter by letter with you. That would just be a waste of time. There's not a whole lot of educational material going on in this code. We're basically just registering a new plugin, and then we are loading a JavaScript file at the right place at the right time. This is because the new block paradigm is primarily powered by JavaScript, not by PHP. So again, I will include a link to this code so you can just copy and paste it into your PHP file, just like I did here. Okay, let's go ahead and save that file. And now let's create another new file, but this time a JavaScript file. So use my text editor, new file. I'm going to name it my-block.js. Technically, you can name it anything you want as long as it ends in .js. I'm going with my-block because that's what I've included in the boilerplate PHP, right? That's the file that our PHP is going to try to load. Okay, now let's jump into that JavaScript file. And before we write any real code, let's first write an annoying alert pop-up message just as a test to see if our file is being loaded. And let's say this is a test. Let's go ahead and save this. And then back in the WordPress admin dashboard, let's go activate our new plugin. So in the left-hand sidebar, look for plugins. So here it is, My Cool Border Box version 1.0 by Brad. Let's go ahead and click activate. And now let's test things out to see if our JavaScript file is being loaded. So let's go to the edit screen, right? Posts, add new. Awesome, there's that pop-up. This is a test. That means our JavaScript is loading at the right place at the right time. And now we can finally get down to business and get to the actual educational part of this lesson. So let's get rid of this test alert. And what we actually want to do is begin working with the WP object that WordPress adds to the global scope. We can look inside the WP object for another object named blocks. And it contains a method named register block type. Okay, within the parentheses, we want to give this method 2 arguments. So just as placeholders, we could say a comma b. The first argument is a name that we make up for our new block type. I'm going to say Brad/borderbox. The first part of the name before the slash is the namespace. The idea here is that even if a different plugin had a custom block type named borderbox, there would not be a naming conflict because of the beginning few letters and then the slash. So you can just choose your name or a few unique letters. And then obviously you can name your block type whatever you want as well. Okay. The second argument that we want to pass this register block type method, so instead of b, we want to pass it an object. So curly brackets to create an object literal. And then inside these brackets, let's drop down. Okay. And in this object, we want to include several different properties. So type these out with me. Title, colon. For now, let's just set all the properties to a temporary placeholder X. Let's just get the skeleton up and running, and then we can come back and place real values. So title, icon, category, attributes, edit, and finally, save. So this is the overall anatomy or skeleton of a block type. Now let's start filling in each one of these values. So for title, instead of X, let's include a string of text. And I will say my cool border box. So you could think of it as this is the human-friendly readable name, and this is the computer-friendly variable name. Okay, next up, icon. I'm going to include a string of text and say smiley. Earlier in the course, we already learned about Dashicons. Remember, you can Google for WordPress Dashicons and then choose from any of the tons of different icons that WordPress ships with. It's up to you. I'm going with the smiley face icon. For category, I'm going to say common. This just controls where your block type shows up in the block chooser interface. So there's common, there's layout, embeds, formatting, widgets. You get the idea. I'm going with common. For attributes, we want to include an object. So curly brackets, let's drop down. We can think of attributes as sort of the raw data that powers our block. When it comes to the border box that we're building, we only need to keep track of 2 pieces of data. Number 1, we need to keep track of whatever text the user types in. And number 2, we need to keep track of the color that they select. So for attributes, let's say content. You can make up whatever name you want. You could call this text. You could call this pizza. Call it unicorn. The name does not matter. I'm just going to call it content. Then we set this to an object, and then we just describe what it should be. So type, it should be a string of text. So the content should not be an array. It should not be a number. It should just be a simple string of text. Okay, let's include a comma here. We also want to keep track of the color that the user selects. So color, Set that to an object. Let's also say the type should be a string, right? A string of text or a color code. And that's all we need for attributes, right? We just have those two pieces of data that we want to keep track of. Okay, and finally, let's take care of edit and save. This is where the real magic happens. So edit controls the interface that the user sees in the WordPress editing screen, and save controls what HTML actually gets output into the post, right? So save controls what you would see on the front end for that block. Now for both of these, instead of X, what we actually want is a function. So function, parentheses, curly brackets. I like to drop down inside the body of the function. Let's do the same thing for save. Instead of X, give it a function, parentheses, curly brackets. Now within the parentheses for both of these functions, let's include a parameter named props. I don't want to jump into the rabbit hole of what props is. For now, all we need to know is that when WordPress works with our custom block type, when it calls these edit and save functions, it's going to pass into it different methods and data. And by including props here, we will have access to those methods and that data. All right, now within the edit and save functions, we want to return something. To really oversimplify things, we want to return HTML. But it's not like we can just include a string of simple HTML. This will not work. Instead, we need to construct our HTML in a way that WordPress will understand. And as of the date that I'm recording this lesson, WordPress is using a library named React. So we want to create our HTML or our user interface or our DOM elements in a React-ish way. Now, if you've never worked with the React library before, or maybe if you've never even heard of React, that's a-okay. We don't need to know very much at all about React in order to get up and running here. For now, all we need to know is that in React, there are two main ways of creating an element. There's the manual technical way, and then there's a super easy and intuitive way. Let's begin with the easy and intuitive way. Now this might seem like a tangent, but trust me, it's super related. Right now I want you to open up a new tab in your web browser and visit babel.js.io. Or you can just Google for Babel.js. From this website, I want you to click on the Try It Out link up in the navigation menu. Okay, now check this out. In the left-hand column, let's type a bit of HTML. Let's create a div element, right? So opening tag, closing tag. And maybe inside the div tags, let's just say, hello. Okay, now let's look at what the Babel tool automatically generated for us in the right-hand column. So we can see that it's using the React library and it's using a method named createElement, and then it's passing that method 3 arguments. So the first thing is the type of element that you're creating. So this could be a div or a heading level 3 or a paragraph, right? So if I come over to the left-hand column and change this from a div to a for an anchor or link, you can see the automatically generated code updates, right? We see an A here. All right, now the second argument that createElement takes is the attributes for this element. So check this out. Over on the left-hand side, if we give our opening A tag an href of just a £sign for a test, well, we see that reflected in the generated code, right? That's the second argument, any attributes for the element. And then finally, the third argument is the content or the children for the element. In this case, it's just a string of text, right? Hello. But over in the left-hand column, what if instead of hello, we wanted to nest a span element inside our link, and that's where we would say hello? Well, now we can see that the third argument is another call to React createElement, right? This element is nested inside this element. Now, remember when I said that there's 2 main ways of creating an element in React? I said that there's the manual or technical way, and there's the super easy and intuitive way. Now, you might be scratching your head saying, what's going on? I mean, the left-hand column is just HTML, but it's not. So this looks like HTML, but it's actually a syntax named JSX. JSX is an incredibly useful syntax where we can write code that looks like HTML, and then behind the scenes, it does all of the hard work for us and converts it into the appropriate React.createElement code. And that is the type of code that WordPress wants or needs. So let's get back to the real task at hand here. We want to create an HTML user interface with maybe a label that says, "Your cool border box." And then below that, we want an input field where the user can type in their words. So over in the left-hand column, let's make that happen. So maybe we would have a heading level 3 that says, "Your cool border box." And then below that, we would have an input field. Now I see an error message right here, and that's because in JSX, you can only have one top level or root element. To get around this, we usually just wrap all of our JSX in a wrapper div, right? So div, close that wrapper div out down here. We can indent just to stay organized. And now we see a different error, and that's because in JSX, every element needs to be closed. So inside the input, let's include the self-closing /. Now in HTML5, we wouldn't need this, but this isn't technically HTML. It's JSX, and it's got its own rules and quirks and tips and tricks. Okay, let's say that this input has a type of text. Okay, now a bit later on in the lesson, below the input, we would include the color picker tool right about here. But for now, let's not worry about the color picker. Let's just get our input field up and running first. So we just wrote this intuitive, easy to work with JSX code. Now what we want to do is copy and paste the right-hand column into our JavaScript file. We don't need to include the use strict, so I'm just going to select and copy all of this, copy it into my clipboard. Back in our JavaScript file, within our edit method, what do we want to return? We don't want to return a simple string of text. What we want to return is the code that's in our clipboard. So paste it in. Now, technically, we could leave this code as is and it would work as of today. Because as of the date that I'm filming this, WordPress loads the React library into the global scope so we can access it just like this. But there's no guarantee that it's always going to be that way, right? WordPress might change in the future. So the official WordPressy way of doing this is to get rid of the word React and instead say wp.element.createElement. Currently, the official WordPress software is using the exact React createElement method, but who knows, maybe 6 months to a year from now, they will need to modify that method. Or maybe they would adopt a different library that's very similar to React, but isn't React exactly. Basically, this is just an official WordPress abstraction layer. And while you could technically write React.createElement, this is the future-proof way of doing things. This is the WordPress way of doing things. So it's a bit sloppy of me to leave React here as well as down here, but I don't want to waste time in this video having you watch me change this to WP element each time we copy and paste from the Babel tool. Okay, moving on. Before we save this file and test it out in the WordPress admin, let's come down to our save method, and within the body of our function, let's just return null. This is just a temporary placeholder. Eventually, we will want to output HTML for the front end of our website. But for now, just so we can test our edit interface, this will do the trick. So let's go ahead and save the file, and then back in WordPress, go ahead and refresh your edit screen, your post-edit screen. And now if I try to add a block, it shows up under most used for me, but since you've never used it before, you would need to click into common blocks. That's the category that we chose, and there it is, my cool border box. Go ahead and click on it, and there we see it. There's our heading level 3, and there's our input field. However, if we type into this field, green apple, and try to save this WordPress post, so publish and update, if I leave this screen and then come back to that screen, so go back into that post, you can see that it did not save what I typed into that field. And this is because we never told WordPress that that input field has any sort of relationship to our content attribute.